San Juan today at 5:30 p.m. May we rise for the invocation? I'll go ahead and lead the invocation. Lord Jesus Christ, thank you for bringing us here today, this evening. Bless us as we make our best decisions for the community of San Juan, Lord. Bless those who are in need of your services as well, Jesus Christ. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. May we face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated.
Mayor, Commissioners, good evening, staff. The purpose of this meeting is to go over the PIF that we discussed and that we did a walkthrough over at the wastewater plant. And before we start, I want to say that I invited Hollis and Rutledge just in case there's any grants available, monies available, besides on what we're going to be approaching the Texas Water Development Board. So Mr. Frank San Martin is here with us, and I guess Mr. Hollis is going to join us later on. So the first item and the only item that is on the workshop is the project information form, which is a PIV, discussion for the proposed rehab of the City of San Juan wastewater treatment plant to the Texas Water Development Board for inclusion in the fiscal year 2019 Clean Water State Revolving Fund intended use plan for the fiscal year 19. We have Cruz Hogan engineers here with us, Mr. Orlando, Mr. Ramirez, and Mr. Ramirez. Cousins? Cruz, I'm sorry. So, Mr. Orlando?
Thank you, Ben. Mayor, City Commission, it's always great to be here in the city of San Juan on this very cold night. Of course, my name is Orlando Cruz. I'm principal engineer for the firm of Cruz Hogan Consultants. I know Ben's already introduced our staff, but this is Marcos Cruz, one of our junior engineers, and Marco Ramirez, one of our senior engineers in water and wastewater work. We're here to actually talk about our wastewater treatment plant. I thank the City Commission for actually taking time and visiting our wastewater treatment plant, or the city's wastewater treatment plant. And I think in the presentation today, you're going to remember a lot of stuff that you saw out there. A little about our history of our wastewater treatment plant. The current plant was completed and put into operation in the year 2000. Plant is permitted to discharge 4 million gallons per day. Current discharge flow, the plant discharge flow is currently averaging about 2.5 MGD per day, or approximately 60% of its permitted flow. In our presentation, it's going to be two segmented. The first part of our presentation, we're going to be looking at the evaluation and existing condition of our wastewater treatment plant. In the second portion of the presentation, we're going to look at the recent TCQ inspection of the wastewater system. This is Wastewater Treatment 101, and I'm going to read it here. Basically, in a very brief way, I'm going to tell you what a wastewater treatment plant does. A treatment plant is classified as an activated sludge oxidation ditch method of wastewater treatment. This method utilizes elliptical channels with mechanical equipment which inject oxygen into the wastewater. The oxygen allows the growth of bacterium in that digests the waste and removes BOD, solids, nitrogen, and ammonia from the wastewater. Wastewater is sent to the clarifiers. In the clarifier, sludge settles and clarified waters flow over the weirs and then flow into the chlorination and de-chlorination chambers for disinfection. The fully treated wastewater discharges into the adjacent drainage ditch. Sludge that has settled at the bottom of the clarifiers and the collected scum then flow to a pump station where the sludge is either sent back to the plant headworks to reseed the plant with bacteria and organisms, or digested, mixed with a coagulant, and sent to the sludge beds for drying. Dry sludge is then put into containers and hauled away by contractor company to a landfill or to be land applied. In a wastewater treatment plant, our major components, and I think you all actually physically seen these, but real quickly we're going to go through them. That is our plant lift station, the headworks, which has the mechanical screen and the grit chamber. Also part of the headworks down below is the grit washer and the dewatering press. These are the aeration basins, the clarifiers. This is the disinfection chamber, where has the chlorine contact for the disinfectant water. The chemical building, which houses the chlorination and de-chlorination systems. In the chlorination system and the de-chlorination system, you see, this is some of our chemical injections. These are actually our chlorine tanks down here. The discharge metering of our wastewater. The discharge goes through our metering through what we call the partial flume, which is the meter device.
Sir, I got a quick question.
Okay.
In reference to the chlorine tanks,
Right.
is it safe to be, because I remember seeing them on the floor. Is that safe or?
It's pretty typical. You know, normally they're on the floor, they're on scales, and actually it's where they feed the chlorine injection. It's fairly typical on this type of plant.
Okay.
It's just on the floor.
Some of the newer construction, if I may, Mayor, some of the newer construction, they're starting to put them on top of concrete pillars.
Correct, yeah.
And the reason being, because it makes it harder for somebody to drive a vehicle into the tank. So they're above the front end of a bumper vehicle, so it's a big concrete structure. But one of the things that a lot of the smaller plants are going to is to get away from chlorine gas completely and go to ultraviolet disinfection. It makes it a whole lot safer, not only on the operators and the environment, but on the public in case there was an accident, will release gases.
Okay.
The chlorine is very caustic, you know, and a chlorine leak can actually hurt a lot of people. Next slide. And kind of tell you, remember, this is how our wastewater comes into the plant. And this is how it's discharged. You see the difference of what the treatment does for our wastewater. As part of the wastewater, we have what we call the biosolids train. It's where we take in the sludge. The return and waste activated sludge pump station. This is the sludge gravity thickener. We estimate that the sludge comes into thickener at 0.8 solids concentration and leaves about 3%. The sludge digester. The sludge digester reduces the biomass volume of the sludge approximately 40 to 50%. It reduces the amount of sludge that will ultimately need to be hauled away. These are the sludge dewatering boxes that are out there. Actually, the purpose of the dewatering boxes is it further removes water from the sludge and makes the sludge ready for hauling. The sludge drying beds that we saw out there, the plant administration building and laboratory building. Our plant evaluation. Over the past few months, a preliminary evaluation of the city's wastewater plant was performed to assist the city in assessing the current conditions and needs of the wastewater treatment plant, and to assist the city in making plans for any necessary plant improvements. In the preliminary evaluation, we analyzed the conditions of all the existing facilities and equipment. We make recommendations regarding necessary improvements needed to address current plant conditions and the recent TCEQ inspections and plant violations. Plant evaluation, the summary on it, that many original plant components have been abandoned and are at a point where they need to be replaced. Many plant components have not been properly maintained over the years and need to be either rehabilitated, repaired, or replaced. And some of the plant components simply have outlived their normal useful life and need to be replaced at this time. Various plant components and equipment consume electrical power. Newer and more energy-efficient equipment should be considered. Plant controls for plant-efficient operations are limited or currently non-existent. And we recommend the installation of a SCADA system. It should be something that should be considered in the upgrades of the plant. The preliminary plan evaluation includes projected and estimated costs to address the conditions and deficiencies of existing facilities and equipment for any needed and necessary repairs and or replacements. From the plan evaluation, a list of major deficiencies was developed. The first one, plant lift station concrete well deterioration. If you remember, we saw the lift station, a lot of the concrete in the plant lift station has actually deteriorated. The H2S gas has actually corroded a lot of the concrete. Remember, H2S gas creates sulfuric acid, so a lot of the concrete well is being deteriorated. A lot of places already have exposed reinforcing steel. Second one, the headworks mechanical screen was not operational. You remember, this was a thing up in the air, hasn't operated in years. Right now, all the wastewater is being taken in through the bypass channel, and the screen's being cleaned manually. This poor gentleman there is actually, on a daily basis, goes out and actually physically has to clean the screen with a rake. The third deficiency that we noted is the headworks of the grit chamber not operational. If you remember, the headworks, it has a lot of growth, a lot of solids inside the chamber. The headworks of the grit washer, the dewatering screw press not operational. This is the one that's at ground level next to the headworks section. That hasn't been operational in years. The Clarifier scum pump's not operational. Each clarifier has got a scum pump where all the scum on top actually gets pumped away. Those pumps are not operating at this time. The gravity sludge thickener not operational. You remember this one was the one that had a little bit of vegetation inside, hasn't operated in years. The thickener pumps, the thickener sludge pump's not operational. These are the pumps that actually pump the thickened sludge. They're not operational and highly deteriorated. The sludge digester not operating properly. Remember, this was a sludge digester. And the reason they're not operating properly, if we go to the next state, is that digester sludge pumps are missing. These are the pumps next to the digester. These have been missing for some time, and I don't know where they are, but and the whole station is highly corroded and deteriorated. The plant water pump station system is leaking. A lot of these pumps are worn. Actually, they're leaking a lot of water. The pressure tank up here on top, it's got problems. The compressor, even though it's working, it's kind of worn and deteriorated. The dewatering boxes are deteriorated and leaking. These are big red boxes out there that look like dumpsters. Actually, these are being replaced as we speak by the city public utilities, but these are highly deteriorated. Now we're going to talk about the TCQ inspection of the wastewater system. On November 14, 2017, TCQ conducted an inspection and evaluation of the city's wastewater system and treatment plant facility for compliance to TCQ requirements. On November 30th, TCQ issued a letter titled Notice of Violation for the Comprehensive Compliance Investigation for the City Wastewater System. And actually, this is a copy of the letter. We see at the bottom, go back, Mark. We go back to the letter. The city actually received this letter in the middle of December, even though it was dated, 1st of December. On the November 30th, TCQ listed 11 alleged violations. 7 of the violations were for compliance issues at the wastewater treatment plant, and 4 of the violations were for compliance issues at 3 separate lift stations. The violations of the wastewater treatment plant, the first one was failure to maintain mechanical bar screen, and we've seen that bar screen is not operational. The second one was failure to operate and maintain the grit chamber. We've seen the grit chamber, of course, that was not operational also. Failure to operate and maintain the grit chamber, in this case, there was a lot of debris and vegetation in it. Of course, we saw that too. Failure to operate and maintain clarifiers. There's excess solids inside the clarifiers. Failure to operate and maintain the gravity thickener. If you remember, that thing was not operational. Failure to provide required plant protection. Actually, there was some missing sections of plant perimeter fencing. That has already been done by your public works, your public utilities. Failure to operate and maintain drying beds. Those drying beds have basically been abandoned. They got vegetation growing and are basically not being used. The violations of the wastewater collection system. A lot of these David are already addressed, but we're going to go through them anyway. Failure to operate and maintain lift station number 2, excessive grease in the wet well. Failure to secure lift station number 2. West side of the lift station fencing was not fully secure. Failure to secure lift station number 12, barbed wire missing on the fence. Failure to ensure 2 functional pumps at lift station number 20. Lift station 20 only had 1 functional pump at the time. The November 30th TCQ letter requires the city first to prepare and submit to TCQ a written description of corrective actions taken for compliance by December 29, 2017. But of course, the city received that letter mid-December, and the city has actually asked for an extension to reply to that. Also, we need to prepare and submit to TCQ a correction plan to be taken by the city to resolve the non-compliance issues. And actually, we are currently preparing that now. Projected and estimated cost for necessary improvements. We kind of broke this down into 3 sections. The first section is improvements needed to resolve the TCQ plant violations. The next one's improvements needed to repair and rehabilitate existing plant facilities. And number 3 is improvements desired and recommended to upgrade the existing wastewater treatment plant facilities. And we have a plant that's almost 20 years old. And these are the costs that we can. We have extensive cost estimates, but we just kind of gave you the bottom numbers here. Replacement of the mechanical screen, $345,000. Replacement of the grit removal chamber, $340,000. Replacement of the grit washer and dewatering, $115,000. Replace sludge thickened pumps and equipment, $403,000. Replace sludge digester pumps equipment, $75,000. Replace Clarifier Scum pumps, $150,000, for a total of $1,428,000. Of course, these are only construction costs. They do not include any design, financing, legal fees, or cost of issuance costs. The second one, it was, go back, Mark. These were the items that need to be addressed to resolve the TCQ violations. Rehabilitation and repair items, rehabilitate plant lift station, $560,000. Replace plant water system equipment, $138,000 for a cost of $698,000. Next slide. Plant upgrade items. These are to basically to upgrade your plant. You know, we're living 20 years down the road, and plants need to be upgraded periodically. Install VFDs on aeration basin motors. On the next part of the slide, we're going to have costs on the aeration motors as far as energy savings. So to upgrade that plant for energy service, we will install VFDs for $368,000 on the aeration basin motors. Upgrade plant disinfection system to UV. This is something that Mr. Salinas talked about earlier about getting rid of the chlorine and go to ultraviolet light for disinfection. Not only will you do away with the chlorine gas, you get rid of the de-chlorination system at the same time. Install wear washers at the clarifiers. You remember, I think one of the group we took out there last week, the guys were actually physically cleaning all the weirs on the clarifiers. There's a lot of algae growth that goes over. And nowadays, the new clarifiers are being designed. They actually put washers that kind of clean this thing and eliminate somebody have to go out and physically clean them out. That cost was $150,000. Install SCADA plant controls. This plant has no controls on it. Back in 2000, there were very few plants that had actually controls in them. What controls do, they allow the operators to actually have a computer screen, and they could actually monitor their plant, control their plant, and allows the plant to go into automation many times. That way, that fella can go out there and actually do plant maintenance and do other things in the plant. That's a big cost of $1.2 million. Upgrade plant electrical. A lot of it's underground. You know, I know David has made some concerns. There's a lot of problems with underground electrical. We don't know what that cost is, but we simply put an allowance of $600,000 to do that. Rehabilitate existing paving. A lot of that paving out there is actually gone. A lot of the asphalt paving. Cost of $200,000. A new plant administration lab building, $427,000. I think we saw that plan. They're fairly small. I think Mr. Salih was looking at upgrading his lab out there. He certainly needs the room. The workers need a change. They need lockers. They need showers. They need a lot of things. And really, on newer plants, you're starting to see a bigger administrative in a place for the people to actually eat their lunch, take their showers, and that type of thing. We put this item here, install an odor control system. A lot of plants, some plants have them, some don't. You may recall there's a lot of H2S coming into the system. You see the fencing deteriorated, all discolored. That would take care of that problem. That cost is a big one. It's $3.6 million. We threw this just to have some options, you know. Question is if the city moves forward to make these upgrades, how will we fund these? And number one is, you know, certainly you can fund it through your water and wastewater general fund. You can fund it through general obligation revenue bonds. You can fund it, if there's still funding, there is loan money at the North American Development Bank. Historically, you've been funding your water and wastewater through funding through the Texas Water Development Board, either through the Clean Water SRF funds. They also have the development funds, the Water Development Board. The first step, if you move forward in the Water Development Board funding, is to prepare, I think that's the item on the agenda, is to prepare the project information form, which we call the PIF, for any selected wastewater treatment plant improvement project for submission and inclusion into the Texas Water Development Board 2019 Clean Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan. All projects that are funded through the SRF funds at the Water Development Board must be put into the IUP. The IUP is a clearinghouse for when projects are put in the IUP, they have to be actually approved by Region M. And they also, as you put your projects on the IUP, they're actually graded. You know, the Texas Water Development Board, even TCQ, will look at all the projects that are put in the IUPs by all municipalities around the state of Texas, and they will rank your project. You know, number one project rating is very good. You know, rank 99 is terrible. So the projects that actually rate low do well in funding.
Mr. Cruz, I have a
Right.
question. So in reference to, I mean, if you have more violations, you rank up there
Yes,
on top, right? I don't know,
I agree. Yes. Actually, being bad is good in this case. You know,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the way the system works, if you have problems at your plants, they do better as far as the ranking. If you're not rewarded for doing a good job, put it this way. You know, plants that have problems or are out of compliance, have violations, when TCQ is looking at ranking projects, your project will rank a little higher. You know, we always look at when we put projects into the IUP, violations help you rank higher, but there's other components that help you rank higher, and is having what they call a green project. A green project is a project that would save power, would save water consumption. In this case, you know, we're doing a wastewater treatment plant, and earlier, and we'll touch on a little bit about energy savings. If you have a project that you put into the IUP that's a green component project, you get better rankings. You know, when they're looking at loan forgiveness or low interest loans. In the Texas Water Development Board, did I answer your question?
I got it.
In the Texas Water Development Board project funding, being included in the Texas Water Development Board's IUP allows the city's wastewater improvement project to be eligible for funding, which include possible loan forgiveness, which the Water Development Board calls grants loan forgiveness, and low and subsidized interest on loans. These projects are the state revolving projects, so they have subsidized interest by the federal government. The PIF submission to the Texas Water Board for inclusion to the 2019, if we're to move forward to put these projects on, are due by March 2nd of 2018. Our recommendation is if the city wants to look at funding, possible grant funding, low interest funding, it's always good to put your projects in the IUP. It doesn't commit you to anything. But if your project ranks good, you know, you may be eligible for 30% loan forgiveness. Very similar to your water treatment plant. That water treatment plant, roughly a cost of $8 million. You got a little over $3 million in loan forgiveness money on that particular project. So there is money at the Water Development Board, and it's all dependent on the rankings, who submits projects, how your project ranks with the TCEQ, you know, that type of thing. We never know, you know. And usually the process, if you go through the IUP, you put your projects in early March, probably late summer, the Water Development Board comes out with their rankings of your project. And if you move forward to funding, your project applications will probably be due toward the end of the year, if you move forward for funding. That's the end of this project, but we have another quick power, is energy savings. David wanted us to look at energy savings at the wastewater treatment plant, because if we think about moving through the PIF at the Texas Water Development Board, we can look at this and hopefully rank our projects a little higher. This presentation is called the Aeration Equipment, Electrical Consumption and Savings. Your current power bill at the wastewater treatment plant is about $300,000 a year. That's a big number. It's about $25,000 a month. And your aeration motors at that plant consume about 75% of the total power cost. So it's about $19,000 a month or $225,000 a year that your motors, your 4 aeration motors at your aeration bases are consuming. So that's a big cost. And these are the 2 aeration basins, the one up here and the one down here. You recall these are the aeration basins. There's 2 of them. Each aeration basin has got 2 big motors with big impellers. They're beating the water, both one on each side. And I got one of our engineers, this one, to stand next to the engine to tell you how big that motor is. It's a very large motor. It's a 125 horsepower motor. There's 4 of those. Some of the options we looked at, alternatives to possibly saving money, power costs at the plant, changing out the existing basin aeration motors to variable frequency drives. Right now, basically your motor's got high and low speed. And what vertical frequency drive does, depending on the oxygen of the water, they'll either speed up the motor, and you don't need that much mixing, they'll slow down the motor. And it's been shown that you could save about 25% of your total power by using over the existing mechanical aeration. Another option is to convert the existing aeration basin from mechanical aeration to diffuse aeration. It's been noted that we can save approximately 50% of the power costs over mechanical aeration. These are the savings. If we were to convert the existing motors with VFDs, we could save roughly $3,800 a month or about $45,000 a year on power costs. If we were to convert the aeration bases to diffused air aeration, we could save approximately $9,500 a month or about $114,000 a year on power. The capital cost versus the electrical power cost. You see that the power cost, the capital cost of converting the VFDs to $368,000. You have a savings of about $45,600. Converting the aeration basin to a diffused air, you have a capital cost of about $920,000, which you have a power savings of about $114,000 a year. Take it one more step further versus the payback. If you have that same VFD motors with a capital cost of $368,000 with a power savings of $45,000, the payback is 8 years. Same thing with the diffused air with a capital cost of $920,000. Your power savings is about $114,000, so the payback on that one's also about 8 years. To take it one step further is that, we see how much can that savings buy you in debt, So we got the capital cost versus the power cost versus the annual debt payment. On the first one, on the VFD motors, of course, your capital cost was $45,000. That number's wrong. It was 300. What was that number? 368,000. Sorry for that. Power savings of $45,600. Debt payment at 19. If we went out and made a loan for that $368,000, the debt payment per year would be about $19,000 a year. That assumes 3% interest over 30 years, but your savings is still $26,600. On your mechanical aeration to diffused air, you had a capital cost of $920, power savings of $114,000. A debt payment on that loan, if you were to go out and get a loan on $920,000, the savings would be $67,000 a year. So you see where you have money to pay for those improvements over time, and you will still have money over to use for other purposes on your plant. So that's why we're looking at possibly looking at changing out aeration on your power, the aeration motors in your aeration basin. The only thing is that you still have this capital cost up front. So But if you can realize that in your debt payment, basically, it's a pretty good deal.
The lifespan of those motors? How long do those motors
Live,
last?
those, I think one motor's been replaced in the last 20 years. Yeah.
Several of the motors have been rehabbed over the years. Fortunately, like I was telling you during the walkthrough, is there weren't a lot of records being kept back then when stuff was
What I'm
placed. But
saying
on
is,
average,
These new motors, yeah, how long will
on
they?
average, as long as you provide the maintenance, anywhere from 7 to 10 years. That's the lifespan for a motor. Can they last longer? Yes. But after that 7 to 10 years, they're not as efficient as they were. So they recommend that you look into a depreciation funding system to replace those at that life cycle, so that you continue to get the savings that you're projected there. Because if not, they're not as efficient anymore, and they start using more electricity as they go along.
Yeah, because you're spending 8 years to get a payback on them, and they only last 8 years, so it means you gotta get ready to buy a new motor at 8 years.
7 to 10 years. Yeah.
But that would be on any motor, you know,
Yeah.
yeah. But,
Different though on VFD on those motors though, now the motor's being used less than if it's just going on or off. So the wear and tear on that motor is gonna be a little bit different. So, you know, it might extend a little bit more than just the 7 to 10 years like
Yeah,
you were
like they don't
saying.
have a cutoff.
It might be a little bit more
they
than
just speed
that.
up and slow down, speed up and slow down. What kills the motor is starting and stopping.
Stopping.
Yeah.
So,
And so the VFD, what it does is it slowly allows it
You know.
to ramp up and ramp down, depending on how much it needs to be used.
the other motors, since they're a different type of drive than the top ones, the other ones take a lot of beating because they're actually physically beating the water. So every time they come on and off, there's a torque assigned to it. The blowers, the diffused air, they have less torque because the newer ones have magnetic bearings on them. So there's nothing there to torque them. So as they come on, it's much stuff to start, so there's less stress on the metal, so there's less metal fatigue. So the blower motors actually last a lot longer because they actually are self-cooled internally. So they run cooler, they run with less torque, they run more efficient. So their lifespan is actually anywhere from 10 to 15 years. The manufacturers don't want to go any further than that, even though some motors like those have been around since 1998. Have they been rewound? Yes. And actually, I'm surprised they haven't failed anymore because of the lack of maintenance that hasn't been done to them over the past 20 years since this plant came into operation.
That's really, if I may, the key to any treatment plant, whether it's water, wastewater, the key to those components is the maintenance, you know. When the maintenance is done according to the manufacturer's recommendations, chances are you're gonna extend the life of that equipment a lot longer than, they try to be conservative, so if they tell you 7 to 10 years, they're playing it safe, but if you really do the maintenance on those, there's been proven cases, you know, in a lot of plants out there that 15 years, 20 years, the same equipment has lasted. So maintenance is real key in water and wastewater treatment. You know, if you do the maintenance, you keep the records, and you follow the recommendations from the manufacturers, that equipment can last a lot longer than typically expected. Those are just typical values they give us for reference. Say, you know, 10 years more or less. It can be 15 years, to be honest with you. But you have to do the maintenance on them. If you don't, then you're gonna be at the short end of that range.
Most new sewer plants are going to diffused air. I mean, most recently, we did the process design for the Harlingen wastewater treatment plant. We kind of ran through the analysis using mechanical aeration versus diffused. There was no question, even though that, you know, going to new, it wasn't that much of a capital cost, but the savings were just way out there. So most wastewater treatment plants that are being designed today are going to diffused air because you know, the power. Yeah. So anyway, you know, if we were to move forward, David, you may consider doing your I think that's the last slide, right? Yes. Yeah. If there's any questions, you know, certainly there's a lot of information that we went by. Certainly we're here to answer any questions you may have. But I'm glad you all did the tour because I think a lot of that fits in place when you actually physically saw what was out there, you know? And
If I may add, I mean, they did present some options on possible financing, but there's other options beside this. I remember the last meeting, Bureau of Reclamation also has a water efficiency grant, which includes energy. So because we do have the energy component in here, that might be another option to fund some of this. The other one was if you remember, Siemens came and did a presentation about through the energy savings, paying for some of this items. It's basically the same thing we're presenting. There's several other options that we're considering. That's why Hollis is here and his staff. So see what they have available that's out there. One of the things that I want to add to this is that the $25,000 a month on electricity is on the current status of the plant. And like I showed you all during the plant, this plant is severely overloaded. The mixed liquor for this plant, or the solids, milligrams per liter, should be in the range of 3,000 milligrams per liter. Right now, we're above 10,000. That requires a lot more power to make sure to get the minimum oxygen required so we can keep those bugs alive, which is what this picture is about. This picture is about to get the solids. TCQ in their letter, one of the things that they cited us was that excessive solids in the clarifiers. Well, that's why there's excessive solids in the clarifiers, because we don't have the place to get rid of the solids. The mechanical dewatering will allow us to do that and more efficiently. Are costs gonna go up? Yes, like I mentioned to some of you during the presentation. Yes, because we're gonna be wasting at the correct weight that we should. Eventually it'll catch up because of the savings in the electricity, and we'll get rid of the solids that are there now and eventually go back to normal to keep them at the 3,000 milligrams per liter. So that number there can change, and it will change because there's gonna be reduced loading on those motors, so that's less electricity. So that savings number could be potentially closer to 30% instead of the 25% that Mr. Hogan mentioned earlier. And then on top of that, he did mention the reuse water. Right now, even though we're just basically taking money out of one pocket and putting it to the other, we're using potable water, water that we can be selling to an industry or to a customer. We're using it to run the chlorination system here. That's to create a vacuum. Now, we can still stay with the chlorine. It's still an acceptable practice, but by updating the non-potable water system, we can use the same water we're treating to run that chlorine system and remove the potable water that we're currently using to do that, and that water can then be sold to another user. And so that's another savings, and that's also part of the green component that he was talking about. And those are all considered categorical ones, so there's no case studies that need to be done. They're already proven by somebody else. So that's something that as soon as you put it in, you automatically rank higher in the PIF, along with some of the other grants that are out there, like the Bureau of Reclamation. Those are all good things that rank you higher on those competitive grants. So there's a lot of, I know it looks kind of really worst case and really bad, and I'm gonna lie to you, it is pretty bad. But that notice of violation is actually gonna help. And unfortunately, the state's always been like that. Why? They've always punished everybody who's doing the good thing for such a long time. And the guys that have been doing it wrong way are the ones that get most of the funding. But if you all recall, you might remember back in 2014, there was another violation that this plant had for the solids. So we're currently under an agreed order. This is our third year of that agreed order. And as long as we don't have any violations, we come off that agreed order, but that'll also move us up in ranking because of that agreed order.
So, going back to the violations, what is the plan? Or is there a deadline to where we need to address these issues? Or is the state giving us, telling us, do we need a plan or?
That's exactly what they want. They haven't told us you need to fix everything by this date. What they're telling us is you need to put a compliance plan together. This is part of the compliance plan. The first thing is get the evaluation done. They've done it, all right? Good for us, they've been working on it a couple of months before that already on there, so we already knew a lot of this stuff was there. So it didn't take a long time to get that evaluation done. Then two, in that plan, we need to tell them, okay, this is how we are proposing to address all these violations. We can't go out there and take care of this thing right now. It would bankrupt the city. So our proposal is to address, okay, let's get the low-hanging fruit that are the process issues that if it does go down, we will have a serious violation because we'll have stuff going out into the river or into the arroyo that may kill the aquatic life and affect downstream users. So we'll address those first. And that'll be, and we'll tell them our plan is to do exactly what we did. We had the workshop with the commission. There's an agenda item to get authorization from you all to submit the PIF to the Texas Water Development Board by March. That's on the next meeting. And then after the PIF is with that funding over the next 3 to 4 months, 6 months, whatever you plan, you think it'll take to design everything that needs to be designed. Then, of course, after that, we have to put it out for bid and then construction. So that'll be the timeline. The timeline will be, we did the workshop, we submitted the PIF, we're waiting to see what the ranking is with the Texas Water Development Board. Hopefully, with the help of these two gentlemen here, we'll be able to expedite that and move it a little bit further up on the scale. And then after that, we'll bring it back to the commission and determine whether we're gonna seek the funding through Texas Water Development Board or follow other avenues through BEC, maybe NatBank, somebody else, the Bureau of Reclamation, and look and see what else we can come up with. Or simply put a plan together to where we fund it through our retained earnings, through our money coming in, and do the lower hanging fruit that's out there. But we have a really good opportunity to get a higher ranking in the Texas Water Development Board because of the green components that we're looking at, and the fact, unfortunately, that we have those notice of violations. The good thing about those notice of violations is that it's not an enforcement notice of violation right now. It's, and it's.
And you don't want to get.
And we don't want to get there because we're already there. We already had one enforcement, and that's the agreed order that we're on, and it should be over this year because it was 3 years to address that. We've kind of addressed it, but we're moving in that direction again, and that's where I don't want to get. And right now, we need to get rid of some solids, and even the project that we're already going after right now, the bell press, it's not going to be done in time. So I already talked to the city manager that we need to possibly rent a bell press so we can get the solids down, so it'll give us the time to get this done and not have a little bit more cushion so we don't have another violation. Because if we have another violation, then that goes straight into enforcement. There's not gonna be anything around that.
How much was the bell press?
The bell press, the total cost?
1.2 million?
Yeah, this one here, yes.
That's
1.2
this
million
one right here.
Rental, the last time that they rented it, it was about $67,000 that they paid for the rental. And that was for I think it was a 4-month period. So they rented it 4 months for $67,000, and they ran the heck out of it. Problem is that nobody accounted for the cost of the sludge, so that kind of threw the numbers off. Somebody forgot to throw, how much is it gonna cost us to haul the stuff that we're pulling out? So those are numbers that I'm working on right now to see what that, so I'll come to commission, not till probably about the second meeting in February. Because I need to really run the numbers to make sure that we're gonna have that to cover. The good thing about it is that they mentioned it, we did order the 2 new containers. We went and inspected them. There were some issues with them. They're correcting the issues, and they're gonna paint them, and we hopefully take delivery here in the next couple of weeks. So that's gonna help in reducing, so that'll also help reduce the amount of time that we need to rent that bell press. It may not have to be the whole 4 months that they did last time, maybe 2 months, and we run it pretty much 8 hours a day, every day for a 5-week period.
You said that you already have something in place to, when I see this, and taxpayers see this, it's like 75% of the plant is a big plant, it's not operating. And, half of the stuff is gone and we don't know where the motors go. So you're telling me you do have a plan, how we're gonna maintain this up and how we're gonna keep records of what's going in and out? Because, that's, we need it, we gotta do what we have to do. But, to me, when I tell taxpayers, when I went out there and saw it, I saw what you need. But I also saw that half of the things not working and, we don't have no records, nobody's liable of who took this, who did this. And if that's the case, no wonder the maintenance was never updated. And that's what killed this plant, and we don't have a problem putting money back into it because we need it. But we have to have those, first we need to make sure that everything's documented now and what is your plan to keep the maintenance going. I don't see a problem in the bell press. If we need it, we're gonna have to find a way, how do we get the money and how we get the funding. But, first of all, like I tell you, we wanna make sure that you had that procedure, that how we're gonna maintain things and who's gonna be accountable, because, I know that everything broke down, but not at one time, and, they just, and it's not your fault. I'm saying somebody, didn't keep up, and we need to keep records and do the best we can because, we're not gonna be, and I'm not saying that you're leaving tomorrow, but next guy that comes in, like you, when you came in, and everything's just a mess, and I'm not saying only, this thing, it was the way, the brush and all that stuff had the same And it was the same people that kind of just let it go, let it go, let it go, and let it go. And, you know, we need to put something in place that we're gonna maintain these things. And that's why I was asking for the shelf life, how long will those things will last, because, you know, yeah, it's 8 years, and at 8 years, we pay it back, but we need to stretch it out to the last 15, you know, and kind of stagger things up, that not everything breaks. I know it's gonna break and it's gonna give up, but we gotta stagger it where things are, you know, being maintenance, where one thing gives us 15 years, one gives us 20, or one gives us 10 and 15, and we can maintain that, because this, you know, for us, this number is a big number, but there's no option. We gotta get it done, you know.
David, was there any maintenance guys that will oversee this motors or anything that breaks down?
There's never been a maintenance operation here. It's
Never-
always been, it's
they
been
never
just
had
the
a maintenance
operators,
operation.
and the operators did their own maintenance. There's never, and for a plant this size, is not uncommon. For a plant this size, in a city this size, it's not uncommon not to have a dedicated maintenance staff to do that work. It falls back to the operator, and that's part of the operator's duty per what the EPAs and the TCEQ say the operator's duties are. Besides the fact that you only need to operate, is you need to maintain the plant. The unfortunate thing, and I'm glad you brought it up, is that there was never an asset management program that was maintained. Do we have the program? Yes. Is it being updated now? Yes. Is it being cleaned up and make sure that the right information is in there? Correct. That's an ENCODE. That's our fixed asset system. Besides that, I've been sending staff to an EPA-sponsored asset management workshop that they come down to the valley at least once a year. In fact, they put out a spreadsheet that has, so you can enter all the equipment. In that spreadsheet, the EPA has already given you the assigned life expectancy based on their experience over the past so many years, since 1970, when they started bringing in the Clean Water Act. So all the supervisors that are currently in place have been to that asset management program. Unfortunately, we have a lot of turnaround at that plant that, like I told you all, everybody else except for the chief operator has probably less than 5 years working at this facility. But that asset management software is what we're using now. I know you were here for the last budget. If you remember the last budget meeting, I requested a computer-based maintenance management system. And what that will allow us to do, and I'm going to continue to request it, it pulls a lot of the duties from the operator having to physically remember that today we need to go out to Clarifier number 1 and change the oil, or go to aerator number 2 and test the oil. You enter that into the system, and the system every morning automatically spits out the preventive maintenance work order. And that's, of course, it's only as good as what you put in. So that's why I also had requested a maintenance manager, a maintenance supervisor, to put that person in charge to make sure that the data that was going in there is the correct data, the correct model number, the correct make, the manufacturer's recommendation for intervals of maintenance, whether it's every 1,000 hours, every 5,000 hours, every week, the type of oil it needs to take, the type of grease, the type of bearings, type of seals, all that data goes in there. And that is how I propose to maintain this and make sure that there's continuity in the event I decide to retire tomorrow or turn in my 2-week notice today. There's somebody here that can continue without having to pick up the phone and try to find the guy who was here 10 years ago in charge of that to tell them, hey, well, this is what we did, you know? That way, and there's always gonna be a backup, because it's not just gonna be at the plant where a piece of paper can, you know, get waterlogged and get thrown away. There'll be one there at the computer plus on the city server, so there's always gonna be a backup. So even if the one at the site goes corrupt, then we have a backup to that, so somebody doesn't start from scratch.
Even in your maintenance, you got a record, at least if it doesn't last 8 years, you can tell the company, hey, here's what we did, you know, and you know, it didn't hold up. But because sometimes, you know, they're expected to last 8 years, and 4 years something can happen because they're sometimes defected, you know, but if we don't have a maintenance record, how can we say, hey, it's like your car, it tells you, hey, you need to change the oil, and now the car tells you, oil, your tire, you know, and that's what I'm saying. We need to get something where we can be more efficient in how we do our maintenance, and making sure that we try to keep that shelf life longer, you know, so.
One of the things that I mentioned to a couple of you, all, I don't think I mentioned it to you, sir, but there's a conference in San Antonio in April. It's called Texas Water. And one of the tracks that they have every year is strictly on asset management. And that asset management track actually counts towards the little box that's on the project information form for the Texas Water Development Board, where it actually asks you, has your staff been to an asset management training? Check. But it also has a little box in there that asks, has the elected officials been to an asset management training? Check. I mean, I'm not saying you all need to go over there for a week,
Oh,
but
you're saying it helps, you know.
it'll help. Now, the next time the EPA brings that asset management training down to the valley, because they rotate it, and last year they didn't bring it, I was kind of hoping they did. But once they bring it, I will let the city secretary and city manager know, because that would also be a good day. That one right there is actually a full day training, it's an 8-hour training, you sit the class, but it's taught by actual EPA, TCEQ, and professionals they hire that develop that asset management deal. But that actually helps the ranking and the Texas Water Development Board as well. And so my recommendation is if you can, that it's in April, in San Antonio, downtown Riverwalk's a really nice place to be in April, you know, so.
Already a conference in April there, maybe back to that one, and
Yeah.
we can do it.
Yeah, there's another one that's coming up actually right now in February. It's called Utility Management. They also have a smaller track in asset management, but they also have an asset management track that'll qualify for that as well.
When you say que your turnover, the personnel está cambiando, changing kind of often, you know, and I'm asking porque I see that guy cleaning, and I'm picture myself, I wouldn't want to be cleaning that thing there. Do they have all their equipment that they need? Okay, porque you know, when I left there and I got home, later on I kind of feel my nose like, and I know that it's gases, but it was, I'm not saying that I was breathing, but the skin outside felt kind of dry, and I don't know, they're kind of gases, and then the sun, as you hitting those gases, do they affect them, or do they, is there anything that we can do to better that?
It can, unfortunately, to try to mechanically engineer all that stuff out of the plant will quadruple that cost. So what OSHA and the state through the health, under the Right to Know Act, has set some rules and limits on how long you can be in certain things, if it's confined. Out there, we don't let staff get into confined tanks, because one, we haven't certified anybody on site to do confined space entry, so we don't let them into confined spaces. If we have to do that, we contract somebody who can do it. So, because it's out in the open, yes, you're gonna get the odors, and a lot of times, if you're out there 8 hours a day, it even stays on your clothes for days.
I wasn't too worried about the odor, I'm worried, skin, you could feel like como cuando you get burned.
It's part of,
You know, and
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying, and I'm thinking about the employees, you know. And
Yeah.
when you said turnaround, I said, maybe is that something that affects them?
well,
You know.
it does, and unfortunately, let me tell you, what really happens is that, we become a trainer for other cities, municipalities who have, of course, a much larger bankroll than we do. That's just, there's no way to sugarcoat that. We start sending staff to school, they get the licenses, and then there's an opening in McAllen, or there's an opening in Fall, or an opening in Edinburgh. The last two one of them went to Donna, and the other one went to Alamo, you know? And even before that, the last one that went up went to Alamo. They're still in Alamo, you know? But Alamo's paying more, so that's where they went, you know? And I know we're looking at it. I know you all approved a compensation and wage study, and hopefully that'll help us set a plan in place to be more competitive. But it's not unique to San Juan. It's not unique to Weslaco. I sat in a conference the other day where I was letting people know there is a 15,000 operator shortage in the state of Texas. And in the next 5 to 10 years, we're looking at another 10 to 15,000 employees retiring out of this. You know, out of this utility, because the people that came in the 70s when this was at its infancy, those guys are starting to either retire, unfortunately pass away, some of them, because we lost a lot of good people in this industry this past year that were really innovative and did a lot of this kind of stuff. But a lot of those guys are starting to retire or move on and end up working with these guys as consultants for this kind of stuff. So they're moving on, they're starting their own deals, but we're losing the people. And unfortunately, the millennial groups, and I hate to pick on millennials, they're the instant gratification guys. They're the ones that grew up on cell phones and computers and stuff, and they want to be able to do everything here. And if I do it now, I want results today. And this industry is not about results today. It takes a little bit of tweaking here and waiting to see what it does, and then a little bit of tweaking more and wait to see what it does, and maybe tweak here and tweak there. So there's little small changes that you have to do in this industry. And unfortunately, I'm gonna blame myself. We in this industry did a really bad service to ourselves. We badmouthed the industry, and when I was younger, I remember hearing it, you better go to school and get good grades or you're gonna go end up working for the city at the shit plant, I'm sorry, the sewer plant, forgive me. I mean, that's just the way it is, or you're gonna be digging ditches in the utility deal, putting in water lines. We did that disservice, so unfortunately, that stuck with the parents of these guys, David Salinas, you know? And we did it to ourselves. We didn't promote this, and so it's hard to get people to come and work in that industry. So that's why you're seeing a lot of automation that they're talking about SCADA, because now a plant that used to take 4 operators to run it, you can do it with 1 guy, because he just goes sits in front of a computer and makes some changes and adjustments. But you still need the maintenance guys. Now those guys don't have to be certified under TCEQ to do the maintenance. The guys that operate it have to be certified. But the guys that maintain it don't, as long as there's a certified guy there when they're doing the work. And so there's, municipalities and utilities have found ways to get around that, but unfortunately, you gotta get the people interested. I've had positions available, and I got 3 guys to apply. 3 guys over the past 6 months to apply to 1 position. 3 guys. None of them have any experience in this industry, except for 1, but that guy jumps around. I think he's been employed by the city twice. You know, and I hired him in Westlaco, and then a buddy of mine hired him in Brownsville, and now he's looking for a job because nobody wants to hire him because he hangs around for 2-3 months and leaves. And hangs around for 2-3 months and leaves. So, and unfortunately for us, it takes 3 years to really get a license that counts in this industry. Any license below that, unfortunately, is only good for that amount of period. Anything else, you gotta renew. I apologize, I went too long. I know, sir, you wanna?
Honestly, what kind of money is out there? Do you know anything, or?
Well, I think it's, our engineers here recapped it pretty well. The resources that used to be, Commissioner, as you probably well know, are not the same today as they were several years ago. The loss of diminishing returns has reduced considerably. The Water Development Board does have quite a bit of money. I think that this is the route that you should seriously consider. Net Bank at the present time is under a continuing resolution, meaning that they don't know at this juncture whether they're going to exist tomorrow or not, but I know that that was alluded to by your engineers, and that may be another source. We'll just have to wait and see once the budget process is taking place in Congress. And then the other is, of course, your local resources, your certificates of obligation, your revenue bonds, and it may be a combination of all 3 or others that you might want to consider. I think that this is obviously a very aggressive plan. I think that we need to prioritize, as has been somewhat alluded to in this discussion, to be able to mitigate the present issues that have been cited by TCEQ, to buy us some time so that we can plan appropriately by priority, by phases, and ultimately addressing the need. Because it stands to reason that not only are you looking at the violation issue, but you're looking at growth. There's no question in anybody's mind, certainly in this room, that you have to anticipate growth, and you are, and you're going to. So it's a matter of your present needs plus your capital improvement program and plan as to what you're gonna be, looking at for now and in the future to expand your present existing system. Besides the fact that you have an immediate issue. The immediate issue is to mitigate your present violations with TCEQ. We have a good relationship with TCEQ. I'm gonna have Frankie maybe chime in a little bit on that. We work with them very closely. But I think that right now, that would be your viable avenue as it relates to state and federal funding. I think you have the demographics, the stats to be able to justify loan forgiveness, as has been alluded to. I think that the fact that you're looking at, as has been articulated here by your engineers and your director, that there's no question that your application will rank extremely high if you all should decide to go this route. And the fact that you are going to get into some energy initiatives relative to the overall plan that you may want to submit that will give us the additional points that we're going to need, because it is competitive. We're not the only municipal government in Texas, but I think we've worked enough with Mireya Lowe, with Beck Brune up until recently, Kathleen Jackson and some of the other commissioners, that we do have a strong relationship there with the staff as well as with the commission, to where we can be able to come up with a plan of action. But I think the first thing is your priority. Your priority is to eliminate or mitigate your violations and come up with that plan, some of which has already been alluded to here that you've already decided to do and are doing. This is why we're here. And of course, the plan that your consultants have put together. So I think it's just a matter of phasing in your priorities and addressing your violations. And then going after the necessary monies that we can possibly apply for relative to TCEQ, NetBank, and other sources, and then look at the future, because it's okay to address your mitigating circumstances that you're facing with at the present time. Part of it has to do with maintenance. You hit it on the money. You can have the world's world's best plant in the valley, but if it's properly maintained, you're going to feel it sooner than later. So I think that should be part of the plan, part of our articulating it to the TCEQ as to what you're going to be doing to try to resolve some of those violations and mitigate them. And then look at the future. That hasn't been discussed here, but I think it merits you all's consideration.
In the future,
Yes.
you get us some funding up there, we'll work with us, whatever you can get up there.
Mr. Hollis, I have a quick question in regards to what you just informed us. I really think that this is something that's a necessity. We need to really look into this matter very closely. And my question to you, sir, is there any way you can maybe set up a meeting to where, we can sit down on the table and talk to TCQ or someone up there to kind of expedite this matter in reference to funding process?
There is already an established schedule, as has been alluded to already. But it certainly merits your wanting to visit with some of the members of the commission. And, we need to do that. And we can do that. We can do that. Plus, in working in conjunction with your engineers and coming up with this plan in conjunction with your director of utilities to do so. Because let's face it, not only do we have mitigating circumstances that we're having to face here because of improper maintenance or whatever the case may be, any municipal government's bread and butter is not your police department, it's not your fire department, it's your utilities. I mean, that's the bread and butter of any municipal government. And you gotta protect it and gotta think in those terms. Because I can see on the other end of it, spectrum of some of the things that I've been working with you all, as it relates to economic development, that I worked with Commissioner Garcia and others when he was over at the EDC board, that there's no question the spin-off effect is happening already. There's gonna be growth in this community. And you're facing the music about the reality, and the reality is you have a tremendous, huge problem in deficiencies as it exists today, let alone the future. That's another story. So I think it behooves you all to not only look at your present needs that you have to mitigate, but also look out for the future. I don't know what your capital improvement plan is.
If I may answer his question, we talked about it when we did the presentation. Right now, we've already got an authorization. We are soliciting, hopefully when the purchasing director is ready with soliciting for a rate study, cost of service study, and a debt capacity study for that future that you're talking about. The other thing that you all funded as part of this year is updating the current 2011 water and wastewater master plan. That is the future.
Absolutely.
So we may have not brought it up in this context because we wanted to focus on this, but that is already in the works as part of this. And that debt capacity is gonna tell us how far can we take our current rate structure to cover not only this, but the additional needs that we have in our current utility, because this isn't the only need. I mean, even though we're upgrading and almost finished with our water plant, there's still a lot of other infrastructure needs. I don't remember the proposed budget that I presented to you all just for the water side was $19 million. That's for 5-year, that was only for the 5-year capital improvement stuff that hadn't been finished or hasn't even been touched as part of the proposed, actually, they put the plan together out of the water master plan. And the wastewater master plan was $17 million on its own for only the 5 years. And we're already past the 5 years, and we've only done, one of them was the water plant. That's a big one. We did that. We did some lift stations in between there. We did some water lines, but there's still over close to $40 million worth of work that we need to update. And then now we need to start looking at what was proposed for the 10-year. And then from the 10-year, it went into the 20, and then it went to the 30. So we have those, but we need to update those and prioritize them. But before we do that, we also need to be cognizant, okay, how much can we actually take on? Will our current rate structure take us there? And is our current rate structure fair and equitable to all rate classes, from the fixed income lady who lives down the street to the guy who owns the 7,000 square foot mansion that waters the heck out of the grass, to the commercial, because even then we have to be competitive with the commercial rates and make sure that we're not subsidizing the commercial growth with our residential growth, because then what's the point of having all this commercial? These guys are going to be moving out because we're unfair in our water rates. So that's what our rate study that's already been funded is going to help. And I'm sorry I didn't bring that up during the meeting, but that's something that we're looking at already. Hopefully we'll be advertising hopefully here in the next couple of weeks. I've already have a lot of interest from different parties, including one from Beck, who works for Beck, that does that on his own. So I'm really excited that we're going to get a good pool of people that are going to participate in that. And then at the same time, well, you all funded the comprehensive land use deal? Plan. So it's actually a really good time to look at the water master plan, because those two need to play side to side, because once the land use map comes into play, we want to make sure that the water lines that we are proposing or the sewer lines that we're proposing are gonna be able to support whatever it is that's gonna go there, whether it's light industrial, heavy industrial, light commercial, heavy commercial, multifamily, single family, whatever it is, we wanna make sure that if we plan a 10-inch water line, that 10-inch water line is gonna be able to support that. Because the last thing I want is to put an 8-inch water line, and then we have a heavy industrial person comes in that really needs a 16-inch water line to be able to support their industry. So that's something that we're gonna have to work together. I think it's a very volatile time right now, but it's also very exciting because of the future that we see for the city. And we'll be able, I think, as long as we follow the plan, and I think there is a plan in place, we can address them. And like the saying goes, is how does an ant eat an elephant? Well, you eat it one bite at a time, as simple as that, so that's what we gotta do. And right now, this is the first bite. Because if not, this can come back and create a bigger bite that we may not be able to handle, because we need to mitigate the violations so they don't turn into enforcement action. And we're already sitting on an enforcement action that, if we get a violation here, that agreed order goes away. And we have to pay the entire violation plus other fees along the way. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to avoid, is make sure that we finish this third year without having an additional violation at this plant. Because that's just the agreed order from the state of Texas. The EPA can still come and do a consent decree on top of that, and that's even more expensive and a lot harder. And all we really have to do is look at Corpus, look at San Antonio, and their consent decrees with their SSOs, with the sewer system overflows. They got, I mean, what was the, Corpus won 300 million or something like that? That was their fine. San Antonio was something almost $1 billion, 800 and some odd $1 million worth of violations off of enforcement action off of their consent decree. Houston, I don't even want to get into Houston, because Houston was even worse. You know, that one was scary. Give me nightmares for a couple of weeks. You know, but that's kind of stuff that we want to prepare for the future. And we're in the right path. The funding is there. We just got to get it done, and this is the first step.
But to answer your question, yes, we can certainly do that.
Conduct this meeting up there and take the aggressive mode.
Very informational, you know, there's a lot of figures. I wish we would say, we're gonna spend the 8 million and forget about it, but that's not gonna be the case. So we still need to look into the maintenance and all, you know, those other extra items. But I think, like David is saying, this is the first most important step to take into the fact that the plan that was created sometime, years back, was never put into place. They were never followed. So now we're having these issues. But these issues can be addressed now, and hopefully it doesn't cost us more later. But with this is a very aggressive plan, and I think that I think it's doable. I mean, if we can start with the year going, then the next step will be looking into the funding, how much we can actually afford to pay. Now, it doesn't mean that we're gonna tackle the whole thing, but maybe we can go with the most important items that we need to address. Yes. Right, and there's a couple of, what do you call those, things that were ordered? Do we need-
Are there, that's gonna help. The pumps that are
pumps, right, there you
missing,
go.
those should be they should be shipping out on the 21st, so we should get them like in a couple of weeks. So those will be installed at the digester, so we'll be able to use the digester a lot more efficient. One of the things that we're looking at is actually next week, we're gonna clean out the gravity thickener, the one that's got all the grass growing in there, because I wanna turn it on. I really do. I don't see any physical deal. We're gonna
Like
get.
the small one?
Yeah, the small one, the
Yeah.
small circular one.
Yeah.
We're having an electrician coming in and megging all the lines, make sure everything's okay, make sure nothing's grounded. He's gonna check all the control panels. And then when I'm gonna fire it up while he's there and see if it works. And if it works, then start using it and making the solids. Because if we can run solids through there before we run it through that rented belt press, then that's less time that it'll take for us to get the solids out of here. So maybe instead of 3 months, it's 2 months, or who knows, maybe 1 month, if we can get that up and running, because we'll concentrate the solids from a 0.8 to a 3%. That's a big number. Doesn't sound like much, but in our industry, that's a huge number. And it'll help us a lot, and that means we pay for less water. Thank you all, I appreciate you all attending the workshop.
much sums everything up, and I want to thank you guys, you gentlemen as well, for the work that you do and, you know, bringing this up. And a workshop, and it's very educational. You know, it's a lot of information that we're digesting right now, but, I mean, it's like David mentioned, we gotta take one step at a time. And of course, it's something that we're gonna have to, you know, deal with, but I think it's just a matter of time. We'll get it done. We'll get it done. So any questions, gentlemen? No? So this is just based on, it was just a workshop, right? So there's nothing that we need to do? Oh, no action, okay. Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
This meeting has been adjourned at 6:46 PM. Thank you.
You have this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep mine.
Then, yes, we'll,
Well, let me
you let me know
let
and
me give Orlando.
we'll brainstorm, get
Yeah.
together.
So we can get a.
Okay.